welcome to our first Executive Forum, a series that brings together industry experts to offer tips and insights on topics that are important and valuable to our audience. For months, the percentage of businesses reporting significant difficulties finding staff has hovered around its all-time high. The same can be said of quit rates and turnover. Businesses across a range of industries are struggling with both recruitment and retention. Today, we will be joined by three industry experts who will share their top tips and expertise on how to find the best talent in open positions, what candidates are looking for in a company, and how to manage some of the ongoing and unique challenges related to the pandemic. Our experts today are Rose Miller, Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships with GTM Payroll Services, Ryan Thomas, Executive Vice President of Business Development of redShift Recruiting, and Renee Walraff, President and CEO of Walraff Recruiting. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to start today with asking each one of you a question. First of all, good morning. How's everybody today?
Good.
Good. I'd like to start off asking each one of you to sort of give us what is the sense of your industry, what it's looking like, and how has it changed over the past couple of years? I'm going to start with Rose on that question. Can you give each of us a sense of your industry and how it's changed over the past couple of years?
Sure. Thank you, Walter. So the big change is in technology and the use of human capital management systems. Gartner studies have said that 85% of organizations are now using some sort of technology to track resumes, to onboard staff. And a good system like the one GTM has, it can streamline posting to multiple job boards. It can, you can review your resumes more orderly, grade them, send assessment to candidates, and then it automatically goes to onboarding. And then from the job seekers, they complain that they never hear from the employer, and a system can be set up to acknowledge those receipts, send, and have communication with that applicant. On the HR side, because a lot of that paperwork has subsided, HR has a trend to be used more strategically, which we do enjoy. And they're counted on to develop those best practices in hiring, recruiting, and retention strategies.
Thank you very much. And Renee, what about you? How has your industry changed over the past couple of years?
In the past, most of our interviews obviously were in-house, right? So now it's the only ones that we did virtual were when individuals lived outside the capital region, but obviously now we're doing 100% of our interviews are still virtual. And what we're seeing is employees' expectations have changed dramatically since COVID. Whether or not they want to work a hybrid role or in an office or remote. We also have clients that are mandating vaccinations. So we have to, we can't furnish resumes to our clients unless they're vaccinated in that sense, Yeah. So it's been changing a lot.
And Ryan,
and candidates out there, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Renee.
No, I was just going to say, and recruiting isn't easy, right? But it's even harder now. I mean, you cannot sit back and wait for resumes just to, fall at on your desk. You have to go out and hunt for those candidates.
And Ryan, how about you?
Well, yes, absolutely. I agree with everything that Rose and Renee said, and thanks for having me, Walter. I think initially, it, like every company, it was like, what do we do? And we actually, in the first few months, lost one employee to childcare issues, and we lost another with the inability to train when they were remote. When they were hired, they were obviously in person. And yes, Renee saying that, and I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I mean, we used to meet every candidate in person, and now every candidate is remote. So that has absolutely changed our business, and the people we're hiring here, aren't used to of that now. So, but in general, job creation is high. There's low unemployment. The Great Resignation is affecting everybody. And we have clients coming to us that are saying, I've never used a recruiter before. Never, but we need one now. So that is created a high demand for us and kept us very busy. Really interesting stat that I saw was via LinkedIn in March of 2020, 1 in 67 US jobs had remote options, and in 2022 1 in 6 offer remote options. And I just think that tells such a massive story, and that's what we're seeing now. We're heavy tech focused, so tech in the past has had remote options, but it's just creating a whole new set of challenges.
Yeah, so brings me to my next question. You sort of answered it a little bit. What trends, Ryan, this is for you. What new trends are emerging in recruiting and attracting professionals in 2022?
So salaries are rising. They're rising with inflation. It's over 4.4% increase. We see that continuing. And what we're really seeing is we did a study of ourselves here in the office of the last 100 positions we filled. Only 28, we run ads ourselves, but only 28% came from the ads that we run. 72% were the hunter mentality. They were the LinkedIn and the who do you know, and having to really go out there, dig into our database to find people. And the value of us who have, experienced recruiters that have done it for a while really give us a bit of an advantage over some of the companies that are trying to do it themselves out there.
And Rose, what are you seeing in some of the trends emerging in recruiting and attracting professionals in 2022?
Well, along with the Great Resignation comes the silver tsunami. That's happening too, where, in the next 10 years, we have a lot of talent exiting and retiring and those gaps. So it is the labor shortage, it will tend to continue. So with scarcity, says things like Ryan had said, scarcity makes them more valuable. So wages have to, and what we're seeing as a trend HR wise is most companies have not looked at their comps, and they really need to evaluate and see what their rates are competitive. If they're not competitive, they're not going to be able to play in this game. So that's one of the major things we see.
Yeah, that's interesting from an HR perspective as well. Renee, I'm going to go to you with the next question. It's a two-part question. How can companies stay competitive with all these changes and trends? And then what can they do to ensure they're still able to find and hire the top talent?
I guess their thought is they need to listen to their employees and they need to communicate with their employees. And maybe perhaps doing like quarterly reviews versus annual reviews, and maybe a compensation analysis or benefits analysis, just to see, if they're paying their, employees appropriately.
That's good. And Ryan, how about you? What from your perspective, how can companies stay competitive with all these changes and trends?
Yeah, it's listening to their employees. It is it's reprogramming themselves. What has worked in the past is not going to work right now from what we're seeing. So again, salaries, flexibility. Again, according to a LinkedIn survey, 87% of employees would rather work remote. So that's something that employers have to deal with right now, and it's gonna exist like this for a while, we think.
Yeah, that's interesting. Rose, I'm going to go to you for the next question. What are today's best practices to onboard candidates?
So this is a really important question because you do all this work to secure talent, and what does help, and it makes a good first impression if there's a nice streamlined way. You have a good HCM system that streamlines all that paperwork. It also helps with remote workers because it's all online, and it helps them with all the paperwork and gives them choices. Doesn't matter where they are. They really like that. That really wins over and makes a candidate feel like they're with a progressive company. But it doesn't end there. Onboarding doesn't end. You need to prepare your managers. We see a lack of training of managerial staff to welcome their new hires and acclimate them. Companies don't have a really good orientation program, and we call it a bonding moment. And you're really missing that bonding moment. There's a list of what employees want out of their companies. And strangely enough, those surveys never pay is number one. It's feel like they're a part of the organization. So an orientation program brings them in and communicates how they fit into the whole, what their career paths are. But even the most fundamental things, where's the bathrooms and the pencils? How do I get supplies? Those things are not missed. It's like you're hired and here you go. And I always joke, like, people have parties when people leave, but they have no party when they arrive. And what are they saying? What's that message? So,
yeah, I'd imagine onboarding is pretty critical also to the retention side of what's happening today. And so, Ryan, I'm going to ask you a second part of that question. Why do you think it's critical, the onboarding process to recruitment, engagement, and retention?
This is so important right now. Recruit fast. I think the days of the 6-step process is gone. You need to get, you're not going to get 10 great people to put through your team. You're going to maybe get 2 people, maybe 3 people, maybe 1 person. So I also think organized. I talked to a candidate of mine yesterday, and she said that one job was number 1 until there was a Zoom meeting that the 2 managers were 5 minutes late on. And she's like, that just gave me a bad impression. So, be organized in the recruitment process, because it's going to make, to Rose's point, it's going to make a huge first impression when you're trying to attract top talent.
Well, that's interesting, Renee. It brings me to another thought here. What are some of the top things that candidates are looking for when considering offers, and what might make them walk away?
Benefits are extremely important to candidates these days. Being flexible with their work schedule, and not to, I guess I'm just going to say this, Ryan, we're seeing 85% of our clients are in the office, not remote, which is interesting. But I will say this, we're seeing more of our clients, even though they're in the office, that there's flexibility, like snow days, or a child's sick, a family member's sick, that they could work remote for a period of time versus, say 2 years ago. But honestly, the majority of our jobs that we have, and we have a ton of them, that 85% are definitely in the office, and then others are hybrid, and then we have a few that are remote.
And I would imagine that's industry specific. So Ryan, you represent a different, not a different, but another sector. Why don't you talk a little bit about your sector of the industries you cover?
Right. So we're dealing with software engineers, network engineers, data folks. Those are roles that can primarily be remote, and we're seeing companies do that. But we also have a lot of, tier 1 support, and, to Rose's earlier point, like, technology has come to the forefront the last couple of years. So, school districts needing, on-site support. We do a lot of business with managed service providers. A lot of companies are outsourcing their IT to them, and a lot of those roles are in the office, on site. So, those two, you have to be out there doing it. But the biggest trend, and we saw this 2 years ago from a technology standpoint, is companies from New York City, California were able to come in and recruit the Albany talent. So with that came these incredible salaries and the work from home. So companies here in Albany have had to really adapt to that on the technology side of things. it's also a plus because you're able to now, change your workforce. I mean, you might have a Zoom call where you have somebody from, California on your team, you have somebody from Boston, and that, type of input and diversity is awesome.
Yeah, and speaking of diversity, women in particular are leaving or being forced out of the workforce at alarming rates. Rose, what can companies do to support women in the workforce?
Well, they really do have to examine what is going on with the major caregiver in the United States and the lack of supports, because it really is a perfect storm of them having pressure on both sides, pressure to do work and be at the office or complete tasks, and then balancing it with childcare, elderly care, all the things a caregiver has to work in. And employers need to embrace a more inclusive environment and allow employees to talk about it and understand what their struggles are and develop ways to get work done with being respectful of what their work-life balance needs are, and really make it and demonstrate that through communications and policies, and demonstrating a visible, measurable leadership commitment to getting work done, but also understanding, because if they're going to have to make the choice, which this is what a piece of the Great Resignation, they had to make a choice: my job or my child. Which one do you think they picked, right? So they really have to stand behind their words and have a commitment that they will support their employees, and provide also ways that they can still have a career and develop with that commitment to families.
And Ryan, I'm interested in hearing your value to that question as well. As a man, what can companies do to support women in the workforce? You're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Walter.
That's all right.
So the tech industry was hit the hardest, tech and healthcare, with the resignation. So we're seeing this a lot, and we have had some clients that have that are working on really on the maternity leave side of things, offering extended maternity leave, having it be a seamless experience so that they don't lose women in that. But in general, women and minorities make up 80% of the workforce here in the United States. That's 80%. So we have got to keep the women in the workforce.
Yeah, I completely agree. And keeping up with the theme of diversity, Renee, what are some of your thoughts on diversity in the workforce? How can companies diversify their talent, and why is it so important?
Studies have shown that diverse teams tend to perform better. If your team lacks diversity, a bias, could occur. I would say that diversity, CEO has to advocate for diversity in the workplace. It stems from the top, and that you have to be intentional, and hiring of diverse candidates such as Black and Brown candidates. I can tell you, we've always tracked race and gender, and there's definitely been an uptick in our hiring here, specifically with our clients, and for Black and Brown people.
Yeah, and I'm interested in hearing from both Rose and Ryan on this as well. Rose, I'll go with you first. What are your thoughts of diversity in the workplace, and how can companies diversify their talent, and why is it important?
Yep. So I asked them two questions when they say they want to have a DEI initiative. So those two questions are: who is the point person? Who's leading this initiative? And the second question: what's the budget? Because if I get an answer that, what do you mean? Those two questions, they haven't even started. So you need a budget, and you need to have a role that has teeth in it, that has decision-making powers to create a plan. And then, diversity comes in many flavors. So there's things that you need to acknowledge. Is your organization ready for those changes? Because they have to be made ready. The managers, are they trained to manage a diverse workforce? And are they culturally aware? It's like the foundation pieces before you can really make this stick and make it work. And many things need to be in place so that when you attract that diverse talent, that you're set up for that success.
Yeah, and Ryan, how do you in your company work with companies to diversify their candidates and create inclusive workspaces?
Absolutely. Well, we recently had a high-level CIO search that wanted a diverse slate, and I think more companies, should request that. And it's part of what we talk about when companies say they want a more diverse, workplace. Diversity is a fact. The numbers are what they are, but inclusion is a choice. And I agree 100% with what Renee said, is that it starts from the top. You need the CEO, the executives to put an initiative, into what they're doing. It's just a proven fact that companies that are more diverse are more productive. Having input from different people from different places. I mean, again, that is one of the great things about the remote work, which I said already, is you're pulling from, you have the ability to pull from diverse populations that you might not necessarily have done in the past with just working from Albany.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting, and we'll keep this conversation going for sure. But Ryan, you mentioned something about people leaving the workforce. What are some of the reasons you're hearing from candidates on why they're leaving a company?
They're leaving because of, some of the things we've talked about, salaries. They're leaving for the fact that companies haven't, adapted the way to the virus that they wanted. We are getting calls from people that say, I will not get vaccinated, so I need to look. That can work both ways, because there are companies that are not requiring the vaccination that are getting talent to come their way. I would say those are the top things. And just some of the old school stuff, like not being appreciated, looking for more opportunity. People realize it's a good market. It is absolutely an employee market right now. The employee has the power right now, not the employer.
And Renee, what are you saying on your side?
It's exactly what Ryan just said. It's definitely an employee's market.
Definitely. And Rose, from an HR perspective, are you seeing anything different or any value to add to that?
Well, just a little insight on what the people are telling in exit interviews. The things that are right at the top is, I wasn't heard, or I had tons of responsibilities and no ability to make a decision. I wasn't necessarily really proud of my organization and the way they behave and what their reputation is in the marketplace. They want their managers to walk the walk, tell the truth, and that there is no clear career path. Those are the top of the list that we see applicants exit and look for something better.
Yeah, well, that's a good place to pause. And Cassie, are there any questions from the audience?
Yes, we have a few. One to go with what we just talked about. With such a dramatic shift in the power balance in favor of the employee or candidate, are you advising your employer clients to lower their standards and expectations, especially if they need to fill a larger number of spots? Obviously, you want qualified candidates and need to be mindful of culture, but some of this is a numbers game. Renee, I think we'll start with you, and I'm sure everybody has thoughts on this.
So no, I'm all about quality. So no, I wouldn't tell them to reduce their standards. But I'd probably say, if we can't find, that these 5 attributes that they're looking for, or what the skill set, what are the top 3? But I would never tell somebody to take a C player over an A player. You know, it might take a little bit longer to get that A player, but it's worth the wait, because as Rose, as you know, and Ryan, as you know too, when you hire somebody and if they leave within a month or two, just that, you know, training cost is so expensive to an organization. So you want to hire right the first time.
Ryan, how about you?
No, I would agree with that. I think what a lot of the clients I've worked with in the past and what's changed is clients want choices, right? I mean, certainly, managers say, we hear from managers, all right, well, I like Susie, but I'd like to see more. And we are just advising them that, maybe take a second look right now at Susie, maybe have Susie talk to somebody else, because the act of going to more, there aren't a lot more. So the act of going to more is, could take another 3-5 days, and now Susie's gone in this market. So that's the type of, yes, we have to take a really solid approach with our clients to educate them right now of what the market's like. And some, as much as, and I say, I'm like, look at 60 Minutes, look at LinkedIn. I mean, everybody's running articles on this market right now. So it's real.
And Rose, anything to add before we go to another question?
Yeah, employees want accountability. They like accountability. They like to be recognized when they're doing a good job. That's the complete opposite of, trying to go to the lowest denominator. You should go to the highest denominator and give them the reason why they're rewarded for and recognized for doing a good job. The talent wants that. The job seeker wants that.
Yeah. Good answers. Thank you. Cassie, do you have another one?
Yeah, we'll stick with Rose for this one. What types of success have you seen from companies hiring top talent while at the same time improving culture?
The job seekers are looking for that culture fit. So they really want to know that organization. And the more truthful you can be about your organization and in better shape, this is the time to start looking at yourself and becoming who you can inspire. You need to inspire in a tight labor market. It's time to look at yourself. What's your reputation management look like? Who are you attracting? What's the message you want to convey? They really are job seekers. I hear over and over again, I want to get behind the company because I like what the company does. I always tell owners that you do a really good job when you're in front of a bank, right? You a banker or an investor, you do all kinds of, you have a song and dance, right? But you don't turn around and understand that's the same message you need to give prospective employees and your current employees. What's special about you? Where are you headed? How are they a part of your success? And that is very attractive, and it helps in not only in attraction, but in retention.
Yeah, it's interesting because in today's climate, applicants are definitely interviewing businesses more than ever before, and those things do matter, and they will matter. I want to touch on a subject real quick. I want to go to you, Ryan, before we find out if there's any more audience questions. You discussed a little bit of onboarding and costs versus training and versus retention. Can you talk a little bit about how much there's a difference in that cost amount?
It's a lot. I mean, it's when somebody resigns, you have to obviously, you lose the work that they're doing potentially now, maybe longer than ever. By retaining your people, you're obviously, keeping that, continuous. And we're seeing companies retain people by having a very robust reward recognition program. That's one solution. And here's the thing: we see that studies are saying that we're still years away from really figuring out like best practices. I think we're always talking about best practices for everything. And I think we're years away from figuring out what's the best practice for working from home. You know, some people excel at it, some people don't excel at it, you know, and that's true. So as much as we get as many requests saying we don't want to work, well, I shouldn't say as many, that's not true, but we do get a lot of requests for people saying we don't want to work from home. We want the office interaction, you know, as far as that goes. And yeah, I think to Rose's point, culture is so important. You know, the staffing industry ourselves has a reputation for a high turnover, and we have adapted over the last couple of years when it comes to the different personalities we have, being flexible with people. But, you know, the cost of leaving a position open is very high. And if you know, I heard from a manager yesterday that said, I'm affecting my staff. My staff is asking when are you going to refill these positions? You know, we can't keep working like this. So, you know, the cost is very high without retention and recruitment.
And Rose, what are you seeing in that area as well?
I think the latest SHRM study I saw was the equivalent of 3 months salary is like a cost that you can automatically assume when you have turnover of position. And so that's significant.
Yeah, that's very significant. It's very high. So we talked a little bit about best practices, and Renee, I'm going to, go to you with this one. What are some best practices in interviewing candidates, and how do you know if someone is a good fit or not?
So it depends, right? So if the position is definitely 100% remote, obviously, you're going to be interviewing remote. But I think it's important. I had a client, I had gotten a new client actually during COVID that did like 4 or 5 interviews remote, but they interviewed like different parts of the team so they could get to know the team that they'd be working with, even though it would be a remote atmosphere, right? And even when, you're interviewing, say virtual, but if the job is going to be in the office, you make sure you interview in that office. I actually had a candidate that came to us that that had taken a new job, but was not through us, but on their own, and was not happy because they did all their interviews virtually. And then when they went to the office, it just was not the right culture fit. So, like you said earlier, Walter, candidates, employees are interviewing the companies as much as vice versa, right? And it's important because then they know whether or not, they feel like they fit in or not. And I think just as far as, knowing if it's a good culture fit, I guess I would say, knowing as an employer, your vision, your goals, do they align in ethics? Do they align with this person that you're interviewing, and vice versa?
And Ryan, how about you? What's your tips for best practices in interviewing candidates?
I think, again, going back to something I said, be organized. I think if you're going to do videos, have those steps lined out. If the manager talks to somebody and likes them, pass them on to the team, and then from there, maybe talk to another manager, but have a clear, time frame and keep the candidate up to date as far as where you're at in that process. And then I would also say, and we started using them here, PI and assessments. I think right now when you're trying to really find out what that culture fit is, a PI assessment is a good way when you don't have 20 people to choose from to diagnose if that person's going to be a good fit.
And when you say PI assessment, can you just tell the audience what that is?
Predictive index, and I know there's a bunch of them. Rose probably knows the most about these, I'm guessing, but yeah, there's a bunch of different ones, but PI predictive index is what we use.
And Rose, since he sort of tossed that to you, what's your thoughts about that?
Oh, I really like assessment tools. PI is a good one. Caliber, Burke. There's so many good ones. It does a lot, helps you know if that candidate is a good culture fit. But I can't stress enough the message to train your hiring managers. You could have a good candidate and and the manager that does not know how to interview well totally blows it. The candidate says, no way am I working for that person. Never mind getting them in legal hot water because they say the wrong things. I've heard managers say, what do you do with the kids? You know, when it had nothing to do with the role. And training them to use behavioral interviewing techniques. Those are wonderful techniques to flush out, and knowing the right questions to ask. Availability is a big one that they never ask about availability. And I remember when I was at a Wall Street firm, the hiring manager would forget to ask the West Coast their availability because Wall Street opens at 9 a.m. on New York City. That's 4 a.m. in West Coast, and forgot to tell them, yes, your job starts at 4 a.m. That's a big miss. Okay, that's a surprise.
And I was going to bring up, I mean, talking about the video, we get so much response from our clients that the video wasn't turned on, or yesterday the video was done from a car and somebody got in the car with the person, and there's cats jumping on the table. So we're, just that's a whole nother etiquette to video. And it's, we also have clients that will say, well, there wasn't enough energy on the video. And of course I'm thinking, like, what does the energy mean? It's it's tough, even doing this type of thing, it's tough to say here, are you supposed to bounce around? Are you supposed to ask a ton of questions? Are you supposed to listen a lot? I mean, it's just like Renee said, I mean, the best way is to get people in person, but in lieu of that, what makes a good video situation?
And Ryan, before I go to the next question, when you say client, are you talking about the applicant or the business entity?
Both. Yesterday I really talked to a client. I said, what are you looking for from a candidate in these videos? To my point, are you when you say energy, are you looking for somebody that is really animated, or are you looking for somebody that's asking the right questions, or answering the questions in the appropriate manner? And just again, educating clients as to here, if you're on a 30-minute Zoom call and there's two other people with you, like what are you looking to get out of this interview, and how are you looking for somebody to express themselves? And again, certainly there's looking presentable and asking questions and being in the right setting. I think some of those things go for granted, but at the same time, some of these people are working, so where do they go to appropriately take these calls? I mean, it's difficult to do it in a bathroom or a conference room, so usually have to go home. So again, it's a whole set of challenges.
Yeah. And Rose, do you see this tight labor market continuing? What are your expectations for 2022?
Well, people do get creative, and I never underestimate, especially business owners and their ability to adapt, pivot, and come up with different solutions. So that's maybe I'm an eternal optimist. So we do have labor shortages, but there's a lot of different ways that companies can look at automation, they can look at improving processes, they can widen their nets because they have, this is a different reality that we have. You have to embrace the different ways of acquiring talent and keeping talent. So it's just the more creative you can be, the more you embrace technology to help you out, bring in the experts when you need to. I mean, if you don't have the time to go through the hiring process, give it to the experts, outsource that piece, because you're not doing yourself any service. So I think people, businesses will come up with different ideas and new ideas to meet the challenges.
Well, that's a perfect question for Ryan and Renee. Ryan, I'll start with you. When is the right time for a company to work with a professional and outsource that?
Sure. I think, now, call us now, right, Renee? But
yeah, 518-275-4816.
But I think, we understand the cost, right? We understand the cost. We talked about the cost of not filling positions, but certainly when you run an ad, when you check your internal system, when you check your pipeline, and the minute you know that you don't have responses and you don't have anybody that looks good, the ad's not working, reach out to us. Again, going to what I said earlier in regards to our study here, of the 28% that we filled from an ad ourselves, only 2% were the actual position that they were applying to. So while a company might post an ad for a project manager, that's the one ad, that's the one position they're looking for. Recruiters like myself and Renee, we have 100 positions we're looking for. So all of those people that are coming in the pipeline for position X, maybe they're not qualified for position X. So we can put them in the database for position Y, position Z. So, we have a lot of advantage to, the type of people we can look for. And just again, that I keep going back to the hunter mentality, somebody that will target recruit, somebody that will use their LinkedIn networks, somebody that, we typically know people when somebody calls for a position.
Yep. And Renee, how about you? When is the right time for a company to work with a professional from your viewpoint?
When they realize that they think they're a recruiter when they're not. Basically, when they're working on the job, when their skill set is something totally different. And, that's when they need to definitely come to a recruiter.
And Rose, an interesting topic that is coming up, immigration. And can you give us a sense of the impact that immigration restrictions are having on employers who often bring in international talent for high-skilled technology and engineering jobs? How can employers make up for this shortage?
So this has been a problem that's been for decades, because if and I'm probably older than I want to admit, but when I was a child, there was more first generation, second generation US citizens. And now it's rare to find a first generation. Most employers and employees are third, fourth generation, which demonstrates the problem. It demonstrates how long this hasn't been fixed, because we needed those people yesterday. So we really need to figure out how to put people that want to work here, have a better life. But what do you do in the meantime? I mean, there are things that you can do to, I talk to a lot of workforce development groups. You need to embrace internships, create, like our program, our HCM has like a university where you can build your staff. What also used to happen that really changed in the 70s is that you could work your way up in the company. That almost was abandoned. They went straight to the candidates with degrees, rather than look at their own staff and say, how can I develop them? How can I be working and earning skills and degrees and certifications? And that is an excellent way to start. And then some companies, the third thing is some companies, hospitality, the trades, cybersecurity, they're going to the community colleges and they're building feeder programs into their companies. So those are the couple of strategies until we fix immigration.
Yep. And Ryan, I'd like to hear your input on that.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to say that fix immigration, right? I mean, it's, in 2019, immigrants made up 13.7% of the workforce. That's 44 million people. Technology is historically an area where there are a lot of immigrants. To sponsor somebody, it's relatively costly. You're going to do it up front, and then you're going to have to do it a few years later. But we try to educate companies on what that is and how they can do it. In general, another trend we're seeing is that 20 to 25 year person, that entry level person, is a lot of times now being drawn into some of the the light industrial positions, the labor positions, which is taking them away from some of the more professional positions. So there's a really high demand and kind of competitive fight for that level of person.
Yeah. And before we start closing up here, I want to go back to the retention piece here. And Ryan, I'm gonna probably ask all three of this for a quick answer for this. What are some strategies that you see for workforce retention that companies can implement right now?
I mentioned this earlier. Again, a robust rewards recognition program, educate the leaders of companies to the importance of that. I know there's a couple clients we have that have lunches on Fridays. They have food vending things set up. I think the way an office looks is important. I think truly understanding and educating, because we have a lot in the tech industry. The remote is truly educating, having best practices to the best of their ability on what that looks like, and how to include everybody. There has to be people reaching out. If there's a 20-person team, you can't just always talk to 5 of the people. It has to be an inclusive environment, and I think more than ever, being inclusive is important.
And Rose, how about you? What are some strategies for workforce retention in companies that they can implement right now?
Well, it's very important to, if you're going to be doing new models, new ways of doing business, new ways of keeping talent, you can't do same old, same old. You have to have new processes, new policies, new procedures that capture the new way that you're doing business. You really need to upgrade your technology. You need to look at your culture. You need to devise new ways to communicate. We have a whole, list of recommendations and best practices for remote workers to keep them engaged and have them know that there's still career paths, because you used to be able to go to the boss and just build a relationship. How do you do that in a remote workforce? How do you have those? So you need like pop-ups, and that people can join. The boss has a pop-up. Whoever has aspirations can have FaceTime, different things like that to keep the new norm, and meet those challenges. Do things that capture the people. They love to feel like they're connected. So you need to devise ways to keep that connectivity.
And Renee, how about you? Retention and what can they implement right now?
I'm going to feel like I'm repeating what they just said, but keep employees engaged, especially if they are remote, because we've had candidates that don't want to work remote anymore because they don't feel like they're a part of a team. They don't feel like, okay, how am I going to grow within this organization if I don't know what's going on in the organization, because no one's talking to me, and so that's what I would say, regarding remote employees. But even if you're in the office or even hybrid, it's just, again, listening to your people and communicating and letting them know what's going on in the organization. Meet with them quarterly. Say, what are their goals? What is the company's goals? What's the future look like? I think, again, it's just back to communication.
Yep. And before I go to my final question, I'm going to ask Cassie, is there a question or two that she saw in the chat that she'd like to ask now?
Yes. One of these might be kind of quick, but I think it's an interesting question. Do companies need to pay New York City and California salaries to retain local talent in Albany and other upstate New York markets? And I think I'll start with Brian on that, because I'm guessing this kind of applies to tech in some ways.
No, I don't think so. I think that when push comes to shove and it's a local candidate, there are still a lot of things that are very appealing. And I think this will shift back to the idea that, it's great to still be able to, and I think we just talked about, still be able to go into an office, still be able to, meet your boss face to face. I think I think that well, everybody is interested in the highest salary they can get. I mean, we hear that often. I think companies here in Albany can still retain local talent by appealing to other things. As long as the salary is competitive and the benefits are competitive and there's opportunity for growth, I think they can still appeal to, being part of Albany, being part of the growth of an Albany company. I mean, we have such amazing companies, which I think, the Business Review does a great job promoting these, and you read about them, but we have so many great companies here in the Albany area. And I think the Albany talent is still ultimately interested in being here.
Yep. Cassie, another one?
These might be a little too long, but an interesting one on how do you reduce candidate ghosting?
Oof.
That's a good one. Who wants to take that one real quick?
That's
Well,
interesting. I think it's, I can't, nobody can control people, but there's a lot of that goes on. I can say that. I think it seems that a lot of candidates these days are react. I had it on, we were open Martin Luther King Day. Okay, good example. We had every single interview that we had, no joke, forgot because they thought but they remember it was a holiday because that's why we had so many people that were interviewing, people that were off. We had to call them and say, we're not ready for your Zoom. Oh my gosh, totally forgot. And then jumped on. It's kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
That's kind of bizarre, but yeah.
We talk a lot about that. It is a trend that we could have a whole program on that. So whoever asked that question is dead on. But yes, and it's so frustrating for us, and it's even more frustrating for the client. I mean, I try to talk to my people about just really being honest with them and saying, listen, we need to know now if you're not going to be there tomorrow. If you're not, okay, well, we can deal with that, but just please, and walk through scenarios. What happens if you wake up tomorrow and you don't want to go in, or the house is on fire? Please call us. Please, walk. We try to walk through situations of what can happen, and it still does.
Yep. And Rose, anything to add?
Yeah, I will tell you that candidates and job seekers will say that they've been ghosted by employers for years. So they kind of started the ghosting because they'll tell you, I don't hear, I put a resume, I don't know if they got it. I went for an interview. I didn't hear if I got the job or someone else got the job. So we did kind of start the ghosting, and we have to remember that. But to combat the job seekers ghosting, it comes to communication. No more assuming you have a job offer, especially if they have a more than a 2 weeks notice. Touch base and say, if anything, like Ryan said, if anything changes, please be respectful. Let me know. Just don't ghost me. Be right out there with it. Just let me know if you change your mind. And keep communicating until they show up at your front door, because sometimes they don't show up on start date either. It's quite the thing.
Sorry, I want to say thank you for everybody joining us today. Rose, Ryan, and Renee, it was a robust discussion that is not going away. And I appreciate all three of you for joining me. I've learned a lot, and I hope our audience has well. And let's hope this relationship gets better in 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you, Walter.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Ryan Thomas with RedShift Recruiting. I wanted to thank you so much for listening in on the forum that I participated in. Fantastic job to Renee, Rose and Walter for his questions. And, it was a great event. I wanted to reach out knowing that there are probably a ton of follow-up questions. I could see a few of them filter into the chat. So I want to make myself available. If you have any follow-up questions, reach out to me, and I would love to hear from you. This is a hot topic that isn't going to go away anytime soon. We also are obviously here if you need any search help on any of your positions. Thanks, and I look forward to hearing from you.